Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. CRS is dedicated to lifting up and supporting LGBTQIA+ issues and creating safe spaces to have dialogue around these issues. Tonight's discussion centers around the transgender community, and we will be hearing from Jay Rice and Tony Michelle Williams. Jay is a trans-masculine public figure who is fighting for the liberation of oppressed communities on a daily basis. Jay is a DJ, a cultural curator, the director of communications at Brave Space Alliance, composer, and overall practitioner of freedom and intentional justice. I love reading this, Jay. You do so much. Their background in political science and intercultural communication combined with their dedication to the advancement of all Black LGBTQIA+ folks to perpetuate on-the-ground societal shifts, advancements, space, and growth. Jay has spent several years creating safe spaces in Chicago that centers all Black LGBTQIA+ women, femmes, and AFABs, and queers, and is keen on continuing to do so. Tony Michelle is an auto theorist, performance artist, embodied leadership somatics coach, and executive director of Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative. Grounded in humor and joy, she's a celebrated community organizer in prison abolition, criminal injustice reform issues, and leadership development for Black, transgender, LGBTQIA+ people, sex workers, people living with HIV, and Black youth. She has co-led citywide campaigns that has incubated the Atlanta Pre-Arrest Diversion Initiative, cannabis reform, sex worker protections, closing down the Atlanta City Detention Center, and police accountability for the families of Alexia Christian, DeAndre Phillips, TT Dangerfield, and Rayshard Brooks. Let's give them all a round of applause, you guys. This is really exciting. We're deeply honored to have you both here tonight. We can do spirit hands. I know that with Zoom, it's difficult. But we're so honored to have you all. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Jason.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight for our program. And just to, as we've noted, given the speakers, this is going to be a more inclusive conversation than we first thought. So than you were told. So enjoy this inclusive conversation that we'll be having. And so I'm so glad to have the opportunity to have this discussion with Jay and Tony. So without further ado. Jay and Tony.
Hey, Reverend Jason. It is good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here too.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. This is fantastic.
And so I guess the question I'd really like to start with is just tell us about your work. Whoever would like to go first.
Tony, would you like to go first or would you like me to go first?
Totally go first. Hey, everybody. I'm sorry that I'm off camera today. My eyes are a little puffy from sinuses, so I'm just like, girl, I'm gonna take my time tonight. Thank y'all for being present with us in this conversation. A little bit about my work. As y'all heard, I am the executive director of the Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative. We are a Black and trans and queer-led organization in Atlanta, really focused on developing leaders to be organizers and movement shakers and changers in the world, to move transformative campaigns and policies that not just support trans people, but that will liberate all Black folks. And we know that when the most marginalized of us are liberated, then all of us get free. And so we've been in that work since 2013. And I'm happy to be leading the organization in this capacity. My work started 10 years ago when I was a student at Norfolk State University, which is a historically Black college in Virginia. And I was targeted in the dormitory restroom by two young men who thought it would be a great idea to steal my clothes from the shower units and spray my shower with bleach. And I quickly found that I will have to fight for myself, and that there were, even though they loved me, they loved my smile and my personality, and I'm speaking of, like, you know, the housing authority and other students, no one was really willing to fight for me. No one understood, you know, why other folks would do that to me as a Black, trans, and queer person. And I had to teach folks. I had to teach folks in the midst of me dealing with my own trauma. And that's when the work started for me. I spent 2 years in public health supporting Black trans women and youth with HIV prevention and STD testing and sexual education, and found my way again in criminal injustice reform about 5 years ago. And so that's the work for me. I support folks with, you know, housing, and making sure that people are like whole and that they're safe, that they're heard, and that they're seen. And so that's my spirit work. I also am an actress and performing artist, and just the embodiment of joy. And I call it sacred silliness. So I'm happy to be here with y'all tonight and share a little bit of that.
So how did that incident that you lifted up in college, does that, how has that influenced your work? Is that something that helps drive you, or?
Yeah, it influenced my work. It taught me how to fight. It taught me how to fight for my people. It taught me how to fight for myself. And yeah, so it definitely inspired the freedom fighter in me, and inspired also just my commitment to political consciousness, so that I can understand the intersections of how I exist in the world, and the privileges that I don't have and also do have, so that I could show up as a better leader, an embodied leader for folks today. So it definitely created a stronger person, and, like I said, taught me how to be the freedom fighter that I am today.
Thank you. So Jay, tell us about your work.
Yeah, well, first of all, Tony, thank you for sharing that and sharing your story. I really appreciate that. It's always interesting to tell my story. Sarah did such a good job of reading the bio. I do a lot of different things. The main thing I'm doing right now is I'm the Director of Communications for Brave Space Alliance. Brave Space Alliance is the first and only Black-led, all-trans LGBTQ center on the south side of Chicago, and also serving the west side of Chicago as well. And we're essentially just that. We are an LGBTQ center. Our mission is to make sure that we are always providing for us, by us, culturally affirming resources to the LGBTQ community with through a trans lens. But just like what you said, Tony, you know, none of us are free until we're all free. So the work that we do and the resources that we provide at Brave Space aren't just limited to people in the LGBTQI community. It's for everyone. Right now, we have our Crisis Pantry Network, which has fed over 200,000 people since the start of COVID. We have 3 different Crisis Pantry Network sites. We have our Crisis Pantry Network that also will drop off food directly to your home if you cannot leave your house for any reason, especially the elderly, LGBTQIA members of our community, and people who are immune compromised as well. We have our support groups that we offer that have now gone online, so we've been able to reach a plethora of different types of people now. We have our mutual aid groups. We have been on the ground with all of the protests and actions that have happened in Chicago. You know, my partners and I have been out there on the forefront, getting beat, getting pepper sprayed, making sure that we have resources. And that's been a really big factor of Brave Space, especially especially last year, is that kind of on the ground mutual aid. Hey, if there's a protest, okay, we got the bottles of water, we got the safety vests, we got the legal observers. I'm probably going to speak a little bit, but we're out there, we're putting our bodies on the line, because at Brave Space, we realized that since the beginning of any civil rights movement, any sort of revolution that have happened here in America and overseas, Black and brown, trans and queer folks have been at the forefront of that. Just like the namesake of your institution. We have always stepped up when our counterparts needed us to step up. So this year was no different. When protests erupted on the south side of Chicago, we opened up our doors to protesters to be able to get something to eat, to be able to charge their phone, rest, whatever it may be. But we were there. So it is a LGBTQ center that is born out of grassroots organizing. Our executive director, Lasiah Wade, is a grassroots organizer. So everything that we do has an organizing activism umbrella for it. So that's what I do with Brave Space. I'm also an international DJ. I'm also a composer. I work on different scoring for different movies and web series and things like that. What else do we do? I'm the founder of Small World Collective. Small World Collective is an artist collective here in Chicago that focuses on cultural production and the curation of intentional and safe and brave spaces for queer people in Chicago. And I'm also a polyamorous activist. Let's see, I think that's about it.
Well, what brings you to the work of liberation, but then also what does it doing everything else besides the work of liberation that you shared do for you?
That's always a hard question. I think one of the main things that brings me to my work of liberation is my access to certain privileges. I grew up in Evanston, Illinois. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that, but it's a very privileged suburb. And off to school in Carbondale. And if you're familiar with Carbondale, it's very different from Chicago. That is the South. Not only is it the South, they are overcompensating. They are, there are sundown towns. Carbondale is a sundown town. SIU is not going to tell you that when they're recruiting you, but it is a sundown town. And when I got there, there were nooses hanging on the bridges on campus. So that gives you an idea of where I went to school. And when I went to college, got married, and all this other cool stuff, I started exploring and coming to terms with my gender identity, and being my degree is in political science and intercultural communications. And these are fields that are very white, very cis, and very hetero. And my experiences in college, whether it was being assaulted in the bathrooms or different hate crimes that were committed against my wife and I. At the time, we were the only married queer couple on campus ever in the history of Southern Illinois. So we dealt with a lot of backlash from not only people who went to school with us, but from people who were in towns or surrounding towns. And when you start getting assaulted and physically assaulted for your identity, that puts you in a trajectory, and Tony, you can relate to this, that puts you in a trajectory that the only thing possible that you can digest right now is liberation. That's the only thing that's going to fuel you. That is the only thing you're focused on is liberation. And when you bring different privileges, like where I grew up, into it, now I'm not only focused on my liberation, but the liberation of everyone and everyone that looks like me and identifies like me.
So Tony, who comes into the space when you're doing your work? Who comes into the space with you?
There's a lot of people at my back, lots of people who supported me, who I've witnessed, many ancestors, transcestors who follow me, but sex workers come into the room with me, people living with HIV come into the room with me. My grandma and grandfathers and my fathers, my ancestors come into the room with me. Lamia Beard, a Black trans woman who was murdered in 2015, when my dear friend comes to the room with me, and Susan, Susan Laurel, another Black trans woman who poured so much into my life and into my transition and my understanding of who I was as a human being and a woman, and as a trans woman, always comes into the room with me. And lastly, Juan Evans, which is who was a former organizer with SNAPCO, who trained me and onboarded me into the work, who passed away from a random illness that plagued him for about a month. But he's also a trans masculine individual, but he always comes into the room with me whenever we're talking to elected officials or any of that. I know that the work in Atlanta is literally on the backs of his experiences and his organizing. So those folks come into the room with me. God is always in the room with me. Whitney Houston is always in the room with me. Whatever. Come on,
Amen.
Joe. Hallelujah. You better put
Amen.
it. You better know about Whitney. I'll pass it to Jay. So
the next question here. So I guess who inspires you both? And just whoever wants to go first.
So many people. I think first and foremost, who inspires me are some of the people who are in the room with Tony. All of the trans siblings that we've lost, especially to violence, are some of the people who inspire me. Some of the people who I look up to, some of the people who I try to provide some dignity that the society has taken from them. So folks who are marginalized inspire me. My executive director inspires me. My wife inspires me. My partners inspire me. My family, the women in my family inspire me for sure. Trans women of all kinds and of everywhere inspire me, especially being a trans man. I'm constantly inspired by Black trans women. And actually, they're at the top. I'm gonna go ahead and put them at the top. That Black trans women, whoever they are, wherever they are constantly inspiring me to fight this fight and to do what I do, and to seek liberation for all of us. So yeah, there's a ton of. I'm a piggyback off Whitney Houston. The queer icon we never had. I'm gonna go ahead and put that out there. She's up there too with the inspiration. Not sure if we were spilling tea today, but I spilled that one.
right.
So what does it mean to you to be an inspiration to others, and particularly youth?
Ask that question to me.
I guess so. What does it mean to you to be you both to be an inspiration to the trans youth, or trans people?
I don't. I'm humble, very humble. I know that me existing. I know that when I speak, there are many people who come up to me and inspire. I've also developed the leadership of over 80 Black trans folks in Atlanta over the past few years. And so I don't consider myself as an inspiration. I just consider myself as a model of just possibility. And I know it's like low key the same thing, but it means that, I guess the best way to answer the question is that I lead from a place of authenticity. And again, I try my best to embody joy and extend supernatural grace to myself in front of others, so that they can see that it's possible to have grace for themselves. Um, and I try to extend that same kind of grace to other folks. And of course, I always try to lead with joy. So anytime that I'm in a space, I'm hoping that I bring those qualities and ways of being to just, again, like I said, to just be a model for folks that, everything don't have to be so serious, that many people, all of us are grieving in some way, but the fine line in between that is joy. And it will carry us. And so I just try to lead with that and hope that folks are inspired by that and my laughter and my smile. And yeah, I'll pass it to Jay. Thanks for that question.
I mean, I've only spent 20 minutes with you, but I'm inspired and you're fabulous. So there's that. So what about you, Jay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I'm always trying to be, especially with that aspect of life, intentional and brave as possible. In any situation that is trying to show up is intentional. Brave as I can possibly be for that moment, whatever it may be, because Black trans people and the labor that we have to exude is always just constant. So sometimes it also is acknowledging that my level of bravery is different for different situations and for different people. But being intentional with the work that I do, that is what fuels at least my own inner inspiration. We are in a society that is very interesting right now. We're in a pandemic. We've seen racial uprisings. We've seen all of this stuff happening. And we've seen a lot of performative aspects, like performative activism, performative allyship, especially on social media and things like that. So kind of circling back, I just try to be as intentional as possible, whether it's through mutual aid, whether it's through events like this. That is how I try to show up.
So as you've done your work, are there some stories that stick out to you that you carry with you?
Yeah, I will share. Can you just repeat the question once more so I can capture all of the pieces when I share?
So just what are some stories from your work or
Perfect. Yeah, got you. I'm going to share a story from last summer. Jay talked a little bit about the uprisings that happened across the country and across the world in response and in support of Black lives, and also in defense of Black lives. Last year, like Jay said, we were in Atlanta, and Rayshard Brooks, can I just see thumbs or hands waving? I know you've heard of George Floyd, right? How many of y'all have heard of Breonna Taylor, right? And what about Rayshard Brooks? Perfect. Rayshard Brooks, for those who don't know and aren't aware, was a Black man who was murdered on June the 14th in Atlanta in a Wendy's parking lot right off the expressway. He was pulled over by Atlanta police officer. I'm sorry, let me back up. He was not pulled over. He was asleep in the Wendy's parking lot. And when they approached his vehicle, they gave him a breathalyzer test, and of course, deemed that he was intoxicated, and put him under and detained him really without his consent, and searched his car, all of the things. And it ended up in his murder. It ended up in him getting shot in front of a line of cars, including, cars with children, in the Wendy's parking lot. And so, like Jay said, you know, SNAPCO, we were out in the streets, in the Atlanta streets. I know y'all were out there in Chicago turning up, but we were in the Atlanta streets. It's also the night that the Wendy's, if y'all remember that, caught on fire, and people watched from around the world. Myself, including other organizers in Atlanta, like Max Boykin and Devin Barrington Ward, and other folks, conduct a direct action blocking the expressway on Highway 75 and 85. And while I was negotiating for Black folks to have time to get off of the front line to safety so they wouldn't be arrested, and coordinating white folks to put their bodies on the line, again, in defense of Black lives, I was physically assaulted by a rogue Georgia Highway State Patrol officer. And in that moment, there are many things that went through my mind. Number one, I immediately thought that this would be the end of my ability to keep my people safe. If I felt like, you know, they would, as a person who is about defunding police, a person who has been about and very vocal about the abolishment of prisons and cages and police, that this would be, you know, an opportunity for them to get me alone and do whatever they wanted to do with me, right? Also, as a Black trans woman, I did not know or trust who would protect me. I knew that the police wouldn't, but the Black men around me, the white folks around me, would they protect me? Would they put their bodies on the line and fight the police off? All of those things went into my mind. And like I said, as a Black trans woman, I didn't believe or trust that anyone would. And when we talk about the experiences of Black trans folks, we know that the life expectancy of a Black trans woman is 35. Last year, I was 29 years old. And at the time of the assault, and I just did not think that I would make it through. I think that after it, I literally said, as he was taking me down to the ground, I was literally saying a prayer. And this may be inappropriate to some of y'all ears, but y'all know, again, sacred silliness, hallelujah, we're here. Gaga calls it an ear condom. So if you want to put it on, go ahead. But literally, I looked down and all I saw were my two breasts that I named, Mary and Josephine, after my grandmother and great grandmother. And I said, y'all, listen, if I didn't need y'all now, before I need y'all now, please, angels, come through, titties, come through, okay? And literally, as I literally just submitted myself, my worst fears actually, or my prayers that came to fruition. There were Black men who came to my rescue, who pushed the police officers away, grabbed me. There were white people blocking the police officers from grabbing me back into their custody. And those Black men brought me to safety. They pushed me back into the crowd, and I was safe. I was able to see my family the next day and get the biggest hug from my mom. And I just thought about Rayshard Brooks's family. And if y'all ever have time to watch the footage, he specifically asked the police, he said, I live 2 blocks away. Can you even just take me home? Here are my keys. I want to live, right? And so as we talk about, you know, our trans experiences and think about the Black trans women who don't get to go home to their families because they've been murdered or stabbed to death by Black men or incarcerated and raped in prisons, right? Like these are the reasons that we fight. And so I'm really, again, happy that I've came out of that unscathed, you know, spiritually wounded, right? There's still trauma that lives inside of my body. But again, going back to that first question about why this work and what is the work, you know, that's why I do the work. I put my body and life on the line so that folks like Rayshard Brooks's daughters and wives know that there are people fighting for them fighting in the name of, in the life of Rayshard, and really trying to support and build a future where their daughter will have justice, and that she will feel safe without the presence of police. So thank you for asking that question. I've been getting better with sharing that story because I think it's so necessary for people to understand the nuance and intersections of how Black people experience police violence. All Black people, even within the same night. Again, there was a Black man murdered, a Black trans woman assaulted, and many people, white and Black and across identities, were arrested and harmed. So we're all impacted by the criminal legal system. And I encourage everyone, well, I guess we'll talk about that a little bit more, but encourage everyone to learn more about what it means to be an abolitionist, and you know, have the capacity to reimagine a life without police and cages.
Thank you so much. Is there a story that you'd like to share, Jay?
Yeah, and Tony, thank you for sharing that story. Not really a story, more of like an experience, especially as we're, you know, talking about Rayshard Brooks and what went on this summer. If you weren't really out there in the streets, you saw a little bit of what the news showed you, and we know that their biases exist. But you know, if you weren't out there, you did not know what was, especially in Atlanta and Chicago. Brave Space as an organization, again, like I said, we are a grassroots organization, so we stepped up. And I don't ever like to actually refer to myself as an activism or as an activist, because I'm more of like a community coordinator. I'm like a protest uncle. I come in with the Gatorades and like a really nice speech to get people excited and things like that. But an activist, I saw real life activists and activism while we're out there, you know, providing folks with supplies. And I'm like, no, that's not me. So it's disrespectful almost to call me that. But giving insight as to what went on the ground, to the terrorism that Chicagoans, that Atlanta folks experience at the hands of the police. And you cannot call it anything else but terrorism. We were poisoned. We were treated, we were herded like cattle. Bridges were put up and we were trapped. We were beat. And then you go home and you look at the news and you see highlights like violent protesters assault police. And when we're thinking about one of the biggest actions that happened in Chicago, and I spoke there, was at the Columbus statue. And I hadn't ever really seen, of course, we've seen the images. We've seen our ancestors getting hosed down and having German shepherds sicked on them, and, you know, from back in the day. But it's different when you are up close and you feel a policeman's baton on your shoulder, or you start choking because of the pepper spray, or you're seeing little kids get beat because those were children out there. And that's another thing I want to add, especially in Chicago, it is queer youth that put their bodies and souls and spirits on the line to liberate the rest of us. And that needs to be told. It was 18-year-olds, babies to me, you know, and that was an eye-opening experience. I'm like, look at these baby queers, you know what I mean? Like, y'all are so young, y'all are leaving school for this. We never would have thought to form a protest because the dress code is discriminatory. That's nothing I don't think anyone on this call, I'm looking around, that's not the generation we came from. So it was, doing this work was so rewarding in that way, to see who's out there fighting for us. And it's always been the same people out there fighting for us. Black queers, Black trans women are out here organizing. But yeah, I just wanted to share that, is that I don't think enough people really realized what went on this summer with these uprisings. It was an assault It was an assault on American citizens. It was an assault on children, on babies. It was warfare. And we need to understand that. And especially, and I'm glad that, you know, you're from Atlanta, Tony, and you can attest to what was going on in Atlanta. And, you know, I have some activism friends in Atlanta. It had got lit. No pun intended. It got real. And it got scary. And it got real scary. And when you looked at, I don't call it looting. I don't believe in that word. It was community redistribution going on. Because looting, I mean, if we're going to talk about looting, are we talking about the Museum of Science and Industry? Are we talking about all of these that exist in America? So I'm not going to call what community members did to survive. So when the community redistributions were going on, and it's scary. It's scary. You know, I live right down the street. I live in South Shore, and you're looking at places get ran through, and there's organizations like the one Tony works with, organizations like Brave Space Alliance, who literally had to step up and start providing Pampers, toothpaste, things like that, necessities, because the stores wouldn't open in our neighborhoods. So I don't know. Again, not a story, but just kind of an overlook of what happened last year, because that really set the pace for my work as well, and a lot of people's work. And I just always like to reiterate that there are Black and brown and indigenous trans people fighting for your liberation every single day, putting their bodies and, more importantly, their souls and spirits on the line so that we can be free.
Thank you so much. So the 4 years that we just got done dealing with as of January 20th really allowed a group of people that don't generally question their trust in certain institutions to start to question that, whereas Black people have been questioning those institutions for years, centuries, and will never trust them. And actually, Black LGBTQ people have another level of distrust. And so I guess, how do you both navigate life with that difficulty of being able to trust?
Can you repeat that one more time for me?
Yeah, I'm sorry if it was convoluted. I guess I'm just saying that living as a Black queer person leaves you with lots of trust issues based on experience. And I guess, how do you, and this is a question to both you and Tony, how do you all process dealing with those trust issues?
I can take a stab at that question. I want to just say that, you know, we all struggle with trust, whether it be trusting our networks, community, our villages, and for friends and support, whether it's trying to trust in even, you know, leadership, right? Trust in the leadership of our new administration, that they would do the right thing for Black folks, for LGBTQ folks, for folks, again, you know, in the struggle. So I think that it's a human experience that folks who've been harmed and folks who haven't had a lot of had interactions, healthy relationships that you know, folks who are in relationship with them have been accountable and have been also vulnerable with them. I think we all struggle with trust. For me, when I started my generative somatics journey, I'm not sure if folks are aware of somatics or embodied leadership. Can I just see folks' hands if you've heard of it? Somatics is a pathway toward integration of body, mind, intention, and in spirit. And so we have practices that support us in being able to make a request when it's hard, being able to assess when we are struggling with trust, and also being able to practice leaning into it. There are 3 core principles that I just want to share with y'all, and I think that I live by. Openness, presence, and connection. Openness, presence, and connection. Those are the foundational principles of generative somatics. And I found that in those three spaces, I'm able to generate trust and safety within myself, to, again, like I named earlier, to just be able to model that for people, but also to challenge myself to lean into it more. My commitment for the first 2 years of my journey in somatics, is still a commitment that I have, is that I'm committed to trusting and believing that I am loved for the sake of my consistent power and my sanity. I'm gonna say that again. I am a commitment to trusting and believing that I am loved for the sake of my consistent power and my sanity. And that I formed that commitment because there have been majority of my life, many years, that I didn't believe that I was loved. You know, the stories that would come into my mind was that, nobody loved me, I don't want to be here. You know, all of those stories that at 30 years old, this Toni Michelle, with the leaders that I've supported and who support me, the work that I've done, the opportunities, the spaces that I've navigated, there is no way in the world that don't nobody love me. So what was the work that I needed to do to lean into that truth, to trust the people around me, because those stories impacted how I could be in a relationship with those people, right? Those relationships became strained. It's like, of course I love you. Why you treat me like I don't love you? Why you treat me like I don't see you, right? And so, you know, it was, again, my commitment to work through those things so that I can consistently feel powerful in my leadership, also in my experience. And then also, again, like I said, to have sanity, because we got a lot of shit to do. There's lots of work ahead of us. There's lots of work that we're inside of now. And those stories that didn't serve me, I had to be open enough to face them, open enough to be ready and present for the transformation that would come. And then again, connected to the people and the new stories that I was generating for myself. Thank you for that question. I'll go ahead and pass it to Jay.
I don't know what to say after that. First of all, Toni, I was over here taking notes. So thank you for that. No, there isn't anything to say after that. I'll keep it very short. I think one of the ways I work through one of the ways I work through trust issues is by working through the trust issues I have with myself first. And trying to unpack the different traumas that are maybe leading to my trust issues. And I'm working on it. That's not something I'm good at. It's not. I don't trust anyone. I don't trust white people. I don't trust cis het men. I don't. And you know, it's something that I'm working through, and it is not like my trust issues just come out of the blue, especially for folks that fit our demographics, especially for trans folks. You have to understand we have trust issues when 8 times out of 10 we're murdered by a partner of ours. Like, we have to realize that, you know, I think when we're talking about trans murders and trans violence, people automatically go to police brutality, not really noticing and thinking that we are murdered quite often by people who say that they love us. So how do you tell trans people, how do you work through trust issues? You know, so it's hard. It's hard. But for me, it's kind of working in an inside out model first and taking things at a case by case basis.
So I'm kind of going backwards, but one of the things that really stuck out to me was your lifting up trans youth and their work towards liberation. And I guess how can we, as, well, I don't want to call myself an elder, but I guess I am. How can we as elders be better allies to these youth?
Right off the bat, listening. I was on a panel not too long ago with a bunch of elders in the movement. And, I literally couldn't get a word out, and that was hard, especially in the Black community when we are supposed to respect our elders no matter what. And that's not to discredit their work or anything like that. But when you're asking what can elders do for the youth, listen up. And then the second thing you can do is support them financially. After that, support organizations that are supporting trans youth and marginalized youth. But first and foremost is actually listening. There's this rhetoric, ageism exists both ways. And it exists also with folks thinking millennials have nothing to offer, or that the generation after that has nothing to offer, or we're just so loudmouth and you're just so aggressive and things like that. Like, these are things that have been said at meetings I've been at with older organizations like Rainbow Push, for instance, and other older organizations who may not approve of tactics that young folks are using. But you got to remind our elders that you do know that your elders back when you were doing things didn't approve of the things that you were doing either. So it's that cycle. It's like we get a certain age and forget what it was like to be young and what it's like to be the youth. And what I always talk about with my wife, I'm like, I am almost afraid to have kids because these kids now have this, and this is the best tool. We didn't grow up, this generation on this call for the most part did not grow up with this. And this is why these kids are having sit-ins at their schools and are changing dress codes and are getting the police defunded. That was the youth that did that. So yeah, my advice is to listen to what they have to say. They're young, but they are so smart and so connected spiritually with our ancestors in ways that we were not allowed to be. So yeah, I'd say open up those ears first and then open up those walls.
So what have you been hearing?
You cut out, what was that?
Oh, I'm sorry, what have you been hearing from the youth as you've been listening?
What have I been hearing from the youth?
What are the youth telling you?
Like in general, or
yeah, so you're listening. So are they? What kind of issues are they lifting up? I guess is what I'm asking.
I mean, one first of all, funding. You look at the youth and you look at how much money folks like me and people who are younger than me have spent to go to school. We don't have living wages anymore. We can't afford to buy houses. We can't afford to live. So that's the first thing. That when I'm talking to people younger than me, that is what they're wanting, is resources and equitable, culturally affirming resources, not equality. That equality talk was something that is a past generation thing. The youth wants equity. So don't give me the same ladder to see over a fence and you're 7 feet tall and I'm 5'4". No. I have to have a ladder that's twice the size of yours. That is equity. Equality is, let me give y'all the same ladder. Equity is, let me give you something more because we see that we've oppressed you. And now we have to make up for that. It's reparations. That's the other thing the youth wants. Reparations. They're gonna get it too. They're gonna get the student debt eliminated, and they're gonna get reparations. Where I'm from, Evanston is actually on the forefront right now for reparations and having that be something that they implement on a city basis. So young folks want a living wage, reparations, and equity, and that's a new type of liberation talk that we're not used to. We're used to equality, and these kids want equity, and they're.
Well, I've got a question. I mean, on youth, particularly around youth and young adults in rural areas. So, like Carbondale. I'm from Champaign, so Champaign. Those areas, and so are there ways in your work that you connected with youth in those areas after college, or do you still have connections downstate?
don't have a lot of connections downstate. When we left there, we were gone and did not look back. We left there right around the start of Trumpism. So, you know, the Confederate flags were one thing, but what Trump was able to endure, we've got a soundtrack. But yeah, no. So I don't have many connections. I do know we have almost 50,000 followers on social media, and when I look at demographics or reach out to folks and see where they are, there are a lot of trans youth that follow our page for education, for support, for a plethora of different kinds of things. But if it wasn't for social media, which is a great tool that I know, you know, folks my age and older sometimes frown at, but it's an amazing tool. It can be dangerous, it can be hateful, but social media is what's keeping us connected with youth in rural areas and giving them the resources that nowhere around them they can physically get, but at least they can virtually come to a support group that's for trans masculine people or things like that. So social media keeps us in the loop for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that question. I mean, for that great answer. I really appreciate it. And I'm just going to pose a question that probably has an obvious answer, but what do you all think inspires violence against transgender people?
I think that for me, I'll give a quick answer if I can. I think it's, again, the inability for people to embody some of those qualities that I named, to not embody being, you know, being able to be open or present and connected, number one, with themselves first. Because when you're open and present and connected to self, you have more choice and agency, right? White folks, I believe, also struggle with that type of accountability and approach to self when certain white folks are causing harm, right, to Black people and brown people, right? So I think that it is a practice that people are not skilled and equipped with to, again, to make a different decision in a moment, to take a deep breath in a moment, to find ground and space, to offer a different level of pacing to some decision making in a moment. I think people really struggle with that. And as a Black trans woman who've had many partners with men and relationships with cisgender people and or white people, you know, that has been the fight. Is, you know, they're always asking questions. Well, you know, just questions. Why you like this? Why this? Why that? Versus just actually being open with what my spirit and is offering in the moment, and present with, you know, the energy that is in the moment. And I think that people just have a really hard time doing that. And again, accountability. People we don't know outside of punitive, you know, ways and, you know, cages. We don't know how to hold people accountable. And we are afraid to hold people with power accountable to their behaviors and to their lack of empathy, and also to their erasure of different stories and experiences of other people.
So, and how do we also then approach, with that said, I guess, how do we kind of approach preventing and confronting violence against trans people, and what concrete steps should we be taking to try to, I mean, to prevent and confront it?
Jay, did you want to take a stab at the question? I'll take a stab at that. You know, how do we prevent? My answer to that is going to always be supporting organizations whose life works are to prevent these sort of things, supporting organizations whose missions are to provide resources. Because when it comes down to it, violence is perpetuated. It's like a two-headed monster: white supremacy and lack of resources. We face violence. 1 out of every 9 Black trans women will end up incarcerated. That is an astronomical number, you know. So when you look at this is systematic and systemic anti-transness. And I do not like to use the word transphobia because you're not scared, you just hate us. So you all are people who perpetuate this type of violence are anti-trans. They're not transphobic, you're not homophobic, you hate us. That's what it is. Or you hate yourself because you are a closeted member of our community or attracted to one of us. So kind of going back to their other question as to what causes this and what causes all hate in the world: colonialism and white supremacy. You know, a lot of the violence that we face as Black trans people and Black trans men and women is intra-community violence. So it's from people who has the same skin color as us. And when you think about it on a grander level, and why I say this is white supremacy, because there's a type of freedom that trans people have and walk with, that freedom that they are being themselves. And when you are perpetuating and showing that freedom to other marginalized groups who are not allowed to be free as well, or in the ways that they want to be free, that hate gets internalized and spewed out back at us, at Black trans folks who are just trying to live our lives. So, you know, how do we fight it? We fight it, especially as allies. You fight it by donating to organizations who's doing this work. My dog has something to say about this, obviously. You also show up brave and commit yourself to making brave spaces. So if you see a trans person, just like I say the same thing to white people when they ask how can they be allies? Well, when you see a Black person getting pulled over, why don't you pull over too and perpetuate accountability? So outside of opening up your wallet, you have to empathize with people on an intentional level and have a commitment to their liberation as well. So that is being a voice when their voices are silenced. That is putting your body on the line when we've been beaten, either figuratively or literally or spiritually. That is actually stepping up and doing something. So yeah, those two things. Donate some money to the organizations that are doing this work, and then figure out how you can be brave and how you can show up for people on an individual level.
So speaking to that, are there particular campaigns, well, not issues, but particular campaigns that you both want to lift up that we can share with our group?
Yeah, well, March 31st is Trans Day of Visibility. Brave Space will be putting out a visual campaign. But part of that campaign is we have enamel pins on sale. That one of them says "Too Brave to Be Erased," and another one is our logo. So you can go on our Instagram, and you can also go on the Silver Room site, which is a really amazing store here on the south side of Chicago in Hyde Park. And you can purchase these pins. I'm always gonna lift up our sustainability campaign, because when you sustain Brave Space, you're choosing to sustain the lives of the most marginalized people in Chicago. You can do that at DonorPerfect / Brave Space Alliance. You can follow us on Instagram and constantly boost any of the programs that we're doing or anything like that. And when I say that, that's just a matter of resharing it to your story, going on Facebook, liking our Facebook page, helping us gain more traction so that the folks who really need to hear our message can hear it. Organizations like Brave Space and Tony, I'm sure you could probably relate to this. When we deal with sex workers and other marginalized groups, we get shadow banned on Instagram. So we need all the help we can get to make sure that folks are seeing us, seeing our message, and aware of our mission. And also you can always sustain us at DonorPerfect / Brave Space Alliance. And you can go to our website and find different ways to donate as
well. What about you, Tony?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Brave Space Alliance since day one, baby, back in 2014 when I met LaSaya in Philadelphia. So I've been rocking with y'all and supporting. So I'm so excited for y'all's campaign. So in Atlanta, we are working on a few things. We're working on a campaign to defund Atlanta's police department's budget, at least 30% or $73 million for the 2022 budget. We're in collaboration with some amazing organizations who's leading that work. And we're also in the a part of that campaign is a cultural shift. So again, supporting people and facilitating people understanding around the process in which we defund police and the power that they have to do that. And so our campaign is called Breaking Up with 12. If you don't know what 12 is a term used by, Black folks, as we talk about police. People say 5-0, say 12, police, cops, all different kind of words to describe, Vera, to describe the police. But in Atlanta and Georgia, we say 12. We are launching a mixtape project and a speaking series that will be highlighting in the month of March all of the amazing women who've been leading the work of abolition in our city and also across the country. And again, all of the amazing trans and GNC folks who've also contributed to abolition and Black, trans, and queer feminism. So that's our work ahead. Y'all can support us. Y'all can go to our website. I'm going to drop it here in the link and become a donor. You can go to our website and become a donor. You can also sign up for membership. There are roles for all of us in this fight. And the role for white folks in this moment, again, is to be committed to your own transformation and growth, to provide resources and invest in the leadership of Black, trans, and queer people, particularly in the South. And again, you can go to SNAP, the number 4 freedom.org to join us. You can also, if y'all have those, fingers for social media, a lot of Facebook, I know Facebookers out there, a few Instagrammers out there, y'all can follow us at Snap for Freedom. And if you ever want a training around what it means to defund police, what it means to transcend your transphobia, what it means for you to check your privilege and also invest in Black trans folks, you can schedule a training with us and you can email me here, and I just dropped my email. Thank y'all so much for having us.
Thank you so much. I'm just really thankful that you all decided to participate in this conversation, and I am honored that you gave me the opportunity to throw questions at you. Thank you so much. I've learned so much, and I think you have shared so many important insights that we all need to hear and are important to hear. So thank you. So before we go,
thank you for having us.
Oh, you're welcome. Before we go, I'm going to share a benediction, but not necessarily a benediction or reflection. Everyone is a fabulous creation of God, including LGBTQIA people. They are lovely, gifted, beautiful, talented, queer, independent, and amazing beings. Black trans people in particular bring fabulousness to another level. The courage to be themselves brings liberty, and all too often death. May this conversation have informed people and reminded some people and reminded others that the Black trans people are fabulous creations of God. Ashe. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Yeah. Put on some music while we're leaving. This is for you guys.
Yes, and I forgot to thank my fearless colleague for all her work helping me tonight. Thank you so much, Sarah. You were a great help.
No problem. Thank you for your powerful stories. I'm putting on some Whitney for you all.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yes, that's all. Let's see.
I mean, I'd start performing some Whitney, but I'm not sure you all would appreciate that. Well, I guess it's time that we all head out. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity to be with everybody and to listen to these fabulous role models to everyone, but particularly to the trans community. Thank you so much. Good night.